So like you said, you are going to have to fight to get on the ballot here. It's, I've written about ballot access in Georgia sometimes before.
Yeah.
Given that it's such an uphill struggle for Greens to get on the ballots here, why are you stumping in Georgia? What is your message for Georgia?
So the struggle is not just for independent candidates who are not bought and paid for by corporations to get on the ballot. It's for voters to have choices, because right now voters are kind of constrained to this box. The conventional political parties, Democrats and Republicans, that are both funded basically by predatory banks, by fossil fuel polluters, and by war profiteers. And people are being thrown under the bus and are demanding that they have a voice. Right now, it's 50% of voters, actually, who have rejected the Democratic and Republican parties. So it is the largest block of voters, according to the latest Wall Street Journal poll.
They're rejected by not voting, by staying away from the
no,
polls?
actually by how they respond in polls. Do you identify as a Democrat or a Republican or neither? 50% of people, it's neither. It's no thank you, not even partly identify. And for 21% it's Republicans, for 29 it's Democrats, and it's no wonder people are being thrown under the bus in Georgia, like people are everywhere. Jobs that don't pay a living wage, the jobs that have come back are largely part-time and temporary. Healthcare costs that are skyrocketing, wages that are declining actually across America. Housing, which is being gentrified, particularly in communities like Atlanta, really destabilizing neighborhoods and leaving people up a creek, and 40 million young people and not so young people who are trapped in student debt. So these are the things, that we're here to offer solutions for, and to encourage people to stand up, to refuse to be divided, to refuse to be sidelined, and to stand up and demand the future that we deserve, which is within our reach, if we can grab a hold of this promise of democracy again.
But third parties do not have a strong record of success in the United States. Why, when you're fighting for these things, are you taking the third party route? You could be doing a lot of things. I mean, you're a doctor. You could be, having a pretty comfortable doctor job.
I sure could, yes. However, I made the mistake of looking out into what was going on in the wider world. In the clinic, you can't avoid it. And by the way, let me just say that we do have one very powerful example of where a third party was transformative. And in times of great social transition, third parties have had a profound impact on history, whether they win the White House or not. So you can look back to the labor movement. Where is it that Social Security and OSHA, worker protections and child labor laws and the 40-hour week came from? It was the socialist parties that fought that battle in the street, and they took it into the voting booth. In the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. You have to bring that demand into the voting booth, otherwise you are sidelined. So third parties have had an enormous impact, even without winning the highest offices of the land. And Greens already hold well over 100 offices, from city council to school boards and so on, and have made an enormous impact. And for example, dealing with foreclosures and with community destabilization. The Green mayor of Richmond, California, Gail McLaughlin, created a new policy of turning eminent domain on its head, so that the city actually uses eminent domain to seize underwater mortgages and force the banks to renegotiate those mortgages at fair market value, which is what they will do when they have booted out the current owners. But by the city stepping in and using this innovative policy, they can prevent the foreclosures and the destabilization of the neighborhood. So I just want to clarify that there are many things that can be achieved by this battle. And in the same way that there was a socialist candidate for president in the early 1900s, Eugene Debs, he helped mobilize lots of people at the community level to stand up and fight for those local offices and lead the way forward, so that change at the local level can filter its way up. However, there's also an example from history where third parties did win the presidency, and that's a guy named Abraham Lincoln. And where did he get his ideas about abolition from? Well, it was coming from the African American leaders like Frederick Douglass. But in addition, there was a party called the Liberty Party, which was an independent third party that made the case that this should be our political agenda. And the Republicans, which were a small third party at the time, picked that up. Abraham Lincoln won a presidential election at a time of great social upheaval. We are at that moment of great social upheaval right now. Our transformational change could come at any moment, and the more organized we are to lead the way forward, the sooner it will happen. The clock is ticking on the next Wall Street meltdown, on the export of our jobs with this outrageous Trans-Pacific Partnership, the betrayal of both the Democratic and Republican parties here, on the meltdown of the climate, and the ever-expanding wars. So the clock is ticking. This is not a time to sit back and wait for the lesser evil to do it for us. The lesser evil has a track record. So you may point out that third parties have been quite stymied in this country. However, what we can accomplish with the two major parties, unfortunately, is more of the same. And to my mind, you're not only throwing away your vote, you're using your vote as a weapon against yourself if you get talked into surrendering your values and simply voting for one of the status quo parties. We have to stand up and be the moral compass that democracy needs and lead the way forward.
With a name like Green Party, a lot of people might think that's a single issue party. What would surprise people in Georgia about the Green Party if they read up on you some more, if they looked at your website? What's the surprising thing about the Green Party?
That the Green Party has become the major proponent of social, economic, and racial justice in the country, the main political proponent, in that we are a national political party and we are elevating this agenda and changing policies all over the country at the local level. We are perhaps the one party, national party, that is not poisoned by corporate money. Therefore, we can actually stand up for what it is that we need. And our belief is that we're not going to solve this around the margins. You know, we need truly transformational change, holistic change that is as big as the crisis that's barreling down on us, which has an economic dimension, an ecological dimension, a national security dimension, and a democracy dimension. We are basically, we're calling for a real fix right now. We need to declare a state of emergency, an economic, racial, and ecological emergency, and fix it. We have great models for fixing it. We got out of the Great Depression in the 1930s with this thing called the New Deal. We're calling for a Green New Deal that brings us together across the boundaries that the establishment tries to divide us over. They want us to think we have to choose between an environment that can sustain life and can sustain our communities versus jobs. The reality is we can create far more jobs which are healthy for workers and their families and their communities. We can create far more jobs and pay far better wages in a green economy. So green for me means holistic. That's the way nature works. Nature works on all cylinders. You know, nature doesn't just, confine itself to one area. We are whole people. Nobody ever came into my office as a doctor and said, just take care of my pancreas, because it's all connected. And we need holistic solutions like the Green New Deal, which will revive our economy with 20 million living wage, good full-time jobs. It will turn the tide on climate change, and it will make wars for oil obsolete so we can return the bulk of this $1 trillion a year, which is not making us more secure, it's making us less secure. It is blowing back in our faces right now in Paris, not to mention, Beirut and Baghdad. Now, as of this morning, it's Mali as well. There is no end to this crisis, but we have created these terrorist threats through our bloated and very misguided militarization of foreign policy. We need to demilitarize foreign policy. We need to denuclearize the world. And on both of these issues, the U.S. has been leading the charge in the deadly wrong direction. So we need a major reboot of our foreign policies here, along with greening of our economy. And our energy policies, our food policies as well, and our public transportation. So this is a win-win. And by the way, what few people know is that when you actually green the economy, you fix most of the drivers of our health crisis. We are spending $1 trillion a year on a failed military system, but we're spending $3 trillion a year on a failed healthcare system, which is really a sick care system. And we know from actual developments in the real world, this happened in Cuba when their oil pipeline went down, without spending a penny, suddenly everybody got healthy. Death rates from diabetes went down 50%. Heart attacks and strokes went down 25 to 35%, just from getting rid of dirty energy and moving to a sustainable, healthy food system, as well as clean energy, public transportation that creates safe sidewalks and bike paths. So that makes that's the makings of a healthy society and healthy people. That will save us $1 trillion a year as well. So we got all the resources we need, not to mention taxing the rich who've been hoarding the wealth and resources of society. So you put those things together, we have all the money in the world to do what will actually save our lives and create a thriving society while we're at it.
How long do you think it will take to get ballot access in Georgia? We have the court case, but you also have, what can you say, like the historical, historically, like it's been hard to collect the signatures. It's been hard for third parties to organize. A lot of people just gravitate toward one party or the other. What's it going to take to get ballot access in Georgia?
Canceling student debt.
Tell me more.
This is a self-organizing issue.
Okay.
There are 40 million young people and not quite so young people who are held hostage by debt, for whom there is no future, because the good jobs are continuing to go overseas and wages are continuing to decline. So young people basically have two hands tied behind their back. They are removed from political action. They are removed from participation in their communities. There's only one, so remember, 40 million of them. There's only one candidate that you are talking to right now who will cancel student debt as my first action in elected office. We did it for the banks to the tune of about $17 trillion. Students require a tiny fraction of that, about 1.3 trillion. And there are many arguments for it, in addition to liberating a generation which has become a cash cow for a predatory economy. There are many other ways in which this is a massive stimulus to the economy and saves us from the risk of economic meltdown as the bundled student debt, which has become an investment instrument, that can sort of cause cascading crisis in the economy as well, because there's very high rates of non-payment. It's about 40% rate is the real non-payment rate, because it can't be paid, and it's only going to get worse. So it needs to be fixed for all kinds of reasons. We did it for the bankers, we can do it for the young people. If we had a government that was of, by, and for the people, that's what would have happened 8 years ago, and the homeowners as well would have been bailed out, not the banks, who would have been nationalized, split up, and made healthy public service institutions, as opposed to the predatory institutions that they continue to be. So we can do this, and simply by getting the word out to young people who happen to be very good at networking and social media and all that, and aren't dependent on the corporate press, we give people a very compelling reason to come out and vote, and 40 million people is almost what it takes. That's just about what it takes to win a three-way presidential race. So we could, if you see young people beginning to stand up because their lives depend on it, you can see then all kinds of other people who've been sort of intimidated into the paralysis of fear. They may begin to get the sense that, oh my God, we could actually do this if we stand up together. And then you may see a whole lot of other constituencies come in. Another constituency to mobilize here are 25 million Latino voters who have learned that the Democrats are the party of deportation and that Republicans are the party of hate and fear-mongering. So there too is another constituency that may also be very capable of self-organizing, so that we don't need to have the corporate money. We are far better organized this time than we were 4 years ago, and we'll continue to build on that. We have 2 lawsuits to try to break into the corporate debates. We have a petition on our website. So there are many inroads here, but I think probably the biggest one and the most powerful one is the self-organizing that will take place around student debt as that word gets out.
Okay. Well, I guess that's the end of my questions.
I had a couple here from Carrie Williams.
Hi.
Is emailing me here. That's why I've been back and forth.
Oh, okay.
But she's in Chicago right now. But she's involved a lot with some of the environmental things that are happening right now. And you already had a group at the Law Center that was involved with that. How do you see community engagement evolving with
Yeah.
environmental concerns?
It's absolutely critical, and this is where, the rubber hits the road, because it's communities, especially low income and communities of color, that are being thrown under the bus on environmental racism and just environmental abuse. We see this in our health now. We see it in, where asthma rates have gone through the roof. Related to air pollution and the siting of these polluting and unnecessary facilities. We see it in things like Katrina, where it's the communities of color that were hardest hit and have not been able to return in enormous numbers. Almost half the people who had to get out for their lives from the floodwaters have not yet been able to come for lack of housing. In my view, creating environmental justice requires that it won't happen without communities standing up and demanding what we deserve. And our job as a campaign is to lift up these very just and compelling causes, these struggles of frontline communities for water, for clean air, for jobs, for housing. The environment really cannot be separated. That is, the physical or natural environment cannot be separated from the social and the economic environment. And in general, those things compound each other anyhow. It's the same communities that are struggling against air pollution and toxic waste sites and polluting coal plants. It's those same communities that are struggling for jobs and for wages and for school systems that serve them. That's why the name of the game here, I think, is in building broad coalitions for people, planet, and peace. Right now, it's profit over people. It's profit that trumps all. And when we get together and realize the power of our numbers, then we can achieve this whole agenda. We are told that we only dare ask for one little thing, one issue, and it better be something little itty-bitty because we don't deserve more than that. But that's basically how they've managed to buy off these movements, these very powerful movements. In my own life as an organizer, I've really seen an amazing transition to where people are no longer taking the propaganda that we have to be separate from each other, that we have to be divided and conquered. People really understand that we need to work together for an agenda that meets all of our needs for justice, for peace and democracy. We won't get one of them without the other, but together we can create the jobs we need, starting in the communities that need them most, to create solar energy and wind and geothermal. We can put people to work on weatherization and solar hot water. People at all levels of education can be plugged in right now to the jobs that they urgently need. What we need is leadership that will reflect and lift up the voices and the struggles and concerns of those communities, because we do have the numbers. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. The minute we stand up with the courage of our convictions, we can look around and be counted and see that, oh my God, we're not only the biggest constituency out there, we are a profound majority. We have the potential to actually take charge of our political system, create the jobs, end this racist war on drugs, which is part of our environment as well, ensure that we have a right to housing, empty out our jails of all the people who shouldn't be there to start with for recreational drug use. We can treat substance use as a public health problem, not an environmental problem. And have health care as a human right through Medicare for All, which also pays for itself without additional costs. cut the military because it's making us less secure, not more secure. There are much more effective ways to deal with the threat of ISIS, which is actually an outgrowth of our disastrous, catastrophic foreign policy, which not only created the vacuum, but it's our allies that provide the funding. So we can just shut down the funding from the Saudis. We can stop arming both sides. That would be a help. For starters, we can stop arming everybody and stop the purchase of the oil on the black market. So there are very effective things that can be done right now to shut down terrorism. Another round of the past 14 years of utter, unmitigated failure is not the way to go. This is the time for us to stand up and declare that the emperor has no clothes here. Not only does the emperor not have clothes, the emperor is a terrorist with a machine gun and needs to put it down right now. And there are good ways forward for people, planet, and peace over profit. And we, in fact, have the power to make that happen.
Okay. One more quick question.
Sure.
It's maybe a little bit off the subject, but from your personal experiences, I taught media production for 33 years. And one of the things we always talked about in my classes in the last few years is about how some of the very large media control everything. Today you're sitting here with local media that wants to hear, but a lot of people don't want to hear, and the people who are
Big media,
controlling
yes,
it.
exactly.
Personal experiences there at all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the rule and not the exception. We have a word for that group of people. We call them the O-press, as in oppressors, and the repress, because they repress the truth. They'll come to a story and they'll sort of create it. They're in the business of writing the news. Here's an example for you. The first time I got into a televised debate, I was running for governor in Massachusetts against Mitt Romney, and we fought our way into a debate. And I don't mean just the Green Party. It was like everyday people who were being driven to utter distraction, listening to Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. And people wanted to hear a more diverse discussion. So we were basically, there was a big movement to open up the debates. I got into a televised debate where I articulated this agenda for jobs, an education system that actually teaches to the students, not high-stakes testing, and a school-to-prison pipeline, and cutting the military, greening our energy system, healthcare is a human right. Those ideas went over like total lead balloons inside the debate hall, which was just the candidates and the moderator. And I thought, oh well, at least I tried. I went there and I spoke truth to power. Then we walked out from the debate hall, which was the TV studio, to where the press was waiting. And I was mobbed by the press for the first time and the last time, because they have since been otherwise instructed. And what they said to me then was, well, you won the debate on the instant online viewer poll. I had no idea that there was an instant online viewer poll. That was the last time they ever did an instant online viewer poll, and I was immediately taken out of the debates, because the truth is, it's not just like some people are ready to hear it. Most people are ready to hear it because they're totally tired of being thrown under the bus. And it doesn't take like rocket science to understand what's going on here. Most people can smell a rat, and they know that our establishment political parties are it. That was the one case where the press actually told the truth, briefly, for a moment in time. And then therever after, when we've gotten into debates, they cut us out of the picture so that you had to watch the live debate. And they restrict the questions that come to us in a debate. I mean, so they find all kinds of ways to sabotage the truth because they know it's extremely powerful, that they are at risk for being overthrown in a heartbeat, in a legal, democratic vote, if word gets out. That's why when I went to the presidential debates in 2012, to get in, to just listen to the debate, I was arrested along with my running mate. We were arrested, taken to a dark site, a secret site with Secret Service and police, and held there handcuffed tightly to metal chairs until the debate was over and the press had gone home, because it is very dangerous to the political establishment for people to find out that they actually have a choice and they could vote for something else. So this is a system that is teetering on the brink of collapse. It is marshaling all of its forces, to try to stay in power another day, another year. Its time has come and its days are numbered. We don't know exactly when it's going to collapse, and whether that collapse will come from the next ecological crisis, from the next bank meltdown, from the next blowback of our terrorism-generating foreign policies. This is a system which is being devoured from within and is rotting from within, on the verge of collapse. It will come down, and the more ready we are to lead the way forward, the more we have truly principled, independent, third-party leadership that's leading the way in our communities with city councilors and mayors and school committees and so on, the more ready we will be for this transition, which is coming. And the more organized we are, the quicker it will happen, and the greater chances there will be of restoring a livable planet and a livable society for us to go forward on. It's in our hands.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sitting down with us.
Likewise.
Let me take a picture of you looking this way.
Oh,
Is it-
yes.
Because if all your pictures are like this.
Oh, yeah.